My name's Simon McIntosh Smith. I'm an academic. I'm a professor of high performance computing at the University of Bristol. And I'm the general chair of IWOCL. I was the person who created the conference back in 2013, along with Ben Bergen from Los Alamos. We'd been chatting that there wasn't a workshop like this originally for OpenCL users, and said we should create something a bit like IWOMP, had the IWOMP conference for OpenMP. And we thought, well, we'll give this a try and see what happens for OpenCL. And then a few years later, SYCL came along. We thought, well, this is great. It's very closely related to OpenCL, so let's include that too. And here we are 11 years later. We kind of didn't think it would take off quite so well and keep going so long. A little bit of history for those of you who don't know, maybe some of you were there. We actually ran the first IWOCL with almost no notice. Once we'd had this idea, we thought, well, let's go for it. And we organized the first one at Georgia Tech in May in 2013. And even though we only did it with about 2 months notice, I think we still had 40 people show up, which was really good. And then since then, we've had a great series of events. For the next year, we actually went to Bristol in the UK, then we were at Stanford, and then Vienna, Toronto, Oxford in 2018. And then our last in-person was Boston in 2019. And little did we know, obviously, because we run at about this time of year, April or May, so in 2020, the world shut down, didn't it? April and May, we were all at home, and that carried on for a few years. Last year, we were seriously considering doing face-to-face, but there was still a lot of restrictions around the world, actually, this time last year. So we decided to stay virtual. So it's really nice to finally be back in person. And what a nice place to come for this event, one of the birthplaces of computing here in Cambridge. So it's nice to be somewhere so historic. You'll probably see a pattern emerging of where we've been. We like to alternate between Europe and North America. And then we had a big gap from 2019 to this year in 2023. But hopefully next year, about this time next year, we'll be back somewhere in North America. That's all still to be decided. But watch this space for where we'll hope to be next time. And this conference makes big contributions. In total, in the 11 years, we've had nearly 1,000 people come along to the conference. We've had over 240 submissions, so papers and posters and tutorials. And so far, if you go to all the proceedings are on the ACM digital library, so you can go and find these online, go right back to the beginning. In total, all the submissions have had nearly 37,000 downloads. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Sort of think this is a little conference, only a little workshop, nearly 37,000 downloads of the materials that you've all put online, and nearly 700 citations so far, and that's all still going up quite rapidly. So that's pretty impressive. And we've had lots of cool things happen here in the past. Often new versions of SYCL and OpenCL get announced here, and there was an announcement just in the last day or two for the latest revisions of both SYCL and OpenCL. New tools that are relevant to SYCL and OpenCL have been launched here in the past. Lots of new uses of the standard have all happened here as well. There's all really cool things to come over the next 2 days, actually, really interesting talks and posters, new things that you're going to hear about. And lots of really good examples of people using the standards. I've included one little picture here. This was one that was shown off at IWOCL in Stanford in 2015. Nano Simbox, a really cool kind of virtual reality, augmented reality medical training program that used OpenCL to do some interesting sort of particle-particle interaction. Last year, so when we were still virtual, some of you may remember, this is Moritz Sleeman's really amazing real-time ray tracing using OpenCL. And this is some fantastic stuff. He's got some amazing visualizations. If you've not seen his stuff, go and look him up online. You can find his talk from last year as well. Really, really impressive ray tracing with OpenCL. So lots of great stuff that's come from this workshop in the past. Something I always do at the beginning of the conference, if you've been here before, you might remember this. If you've not, hopefully you'll find this interesting. And I just do this once a year, every year I look at how many academic papers are mentioning all the different standard parallel programming languages. And I do this in a very simple way. It's something you could do yourself. I just go to Google Scholar, I type in OpenCL, and I say how many papers mentioned OpenCL in 2008 and then 2009 and so on. And I plot these numbers on a graph, and it's very interesting to see what happens over time. So here's the first graph. So we've got the year along the bottom, and we've got the number of papers that mention each of the parallel programming languages on the vertical axis. And this is just using Google Scholar. I can tell you exactly the search term I used for each of these languages. And I've included OpenCL, we've got OpenMP, MPI, CUDA, Silk, TBB, OpenACC, and SYCL. And then for the last couple of years, what do you think's happened in the last few years? Why don't you take a guess before I reveal? I've hidden the last 2 years of data there, so you don't know what's happened. Is anything going to change? Are the trends going to change, go in the opposite direction? Well, so here's what's happened in the last couple of years, and it's quite interesting. CUDA is still seeing a fairly meteoric rise, and this is really interesting. This is worth digging into a little bit. So actually, on the next slide, I'm going to show you some interesting data about what's happening with CUDA. All of the others fairly flat, maybe decreasing slightly. OpenMP had a bit of a bump last year, which is interesting. Not really sure what's specifically behind that. And we'll dig a little bit more into the OpenCL and the SYCL numbers in 2 slides time as well. But first of all, this CUDA thing, because actually, if you look, it was flat for a while. In sort of 2014, 2015, 2016, the number of papers mentioning CUDA each year was kind of flat. And now it started to go up quite a lot. Why is that? Any idea? Anyone like to take a guess? What was that? What's that? Deep learning, yeah? Something else over here? Right. Well, my guess was maybe it's something to do with deep learning or AI, so on. I'm getting some feedback from someone. Any idea where that's coming from? Okay, we'll try that again. That sounds all right, isn't it? Not doing it now. So I thought we'll dig into this a little bit. What happens if the search term I used for CUDA was NVIDIA CUDA. What happened if I do NVIDIA CUDA AI? And we get this. So remember the need was about 2016, 2017. So interestingly, the number of papers that mentioned NVIDIA CUDA and AI has always been about 15%-ish over time. So even going all the way back to the start of CUDA was first mentioned in 2006. So that's going right back. About 2016, 2017, the number of papers mentioning AI suddenly starts to increase. And in fact, it's increased by about a factor of 3 in the last 6 years. So it's not that there's suddenly a lot more people writing CUDA, it's there's a lot more people using CUDA-powered devices and CUDA-powered libraries and frameworks for AI. So that's really interesting. So this is really a big AI bump driving the number of papers mentioning CUDA. Something else we can look at is digging into the OpenCL and SYCL numbers. So even last year, there were over 3,000 papers mentioning OpenCL, which is really interesting, isn't it? That's still quite a lot. And about 360 for SYCL. So the SYCL numbers are going up, but we've still got a long way to go to get SYCL to start to be up there and mentioned as much and in academic papers, at least, as some of the other languages out there. You can also look at the total number of papers mentioning these languages over time. So this is adding up back to the start of 2006. And again, CUDA is actually the one that's mentioned the most. OpenMP and MPI sort of fairly close to each other, about 90 to 100,000 papers in total mentioning both of those. And OpenCL is about half of that. I mean, that's pretty surprising, right? Because in high performance computing, which is my area at least, everyone talks about OpenMP, everyone talks about MPI. Interestingly, pretty much every high performance computing program will use MPI, and only a subset of that will use OpenMP. So it's quite interesting to see how there are slightly more papers mentioning OpenMP than MPI. So you've got to sort of understand this doesn't necessarily correlate directly into usage or something like that. It's just one metric. Yeah, but OpenCL mentioned half as much as something as popular and widely used as MPI. OpenACC, quite a long way back, only about a fifth as much as OpenCL, mentioned as a fifth as much as OpenCL. Silk, which I don't really hear many people talking about today, still there, still being used a little bit. TBB, and then sickle. So sickle's starting small, still a lot smaller than OpenCL in terms of how much it's been mentioned, but hopefully that's going to grow very strongly over time. So there's exciting things to come. There's lots more advances still coming in sickle and at OpenCL. Still lots more opportunity. Heterogeneous computing is becoming much more ubiquitous now. I mean, this is something that we've all seen coming and been working on for a while, but it is really becoming mainstream. This is the big change. In high performance computing, most supercomputers are now adding in GPUs. As in the past, they were mostly just CPUs. So it's becoming very, very widespread. And obviously in the embedded space, it's been heterogeneous for a long time, and that's not going to change. There's lots of different kinds of heterogeneity. So not just CPUs and GPUs, but also DSPs and all sorts of other accelerators. And that's driving a lot of what SYCL can exploit and OpenCL can exploit. There's some very interesting case studies on some of the posters, which go and have a look at those during the breaks. SYCL is growing rapidly. We're seeing adoption across all sorts of interesting spaces. It's great, and I think it's closely related to AI, and hopefully we'll see lots more adoption in the AI and deep learning space there, but also very interesting to see the developments in SYCL in autonomous vehicles and safety critical systems. I think I could see those being real growth areas as well. And also there are other open parallel computing standards which are important and which are quite closely related. So the developments in ISO-C++, the standard parallelism in that, it's very close to SYCL. And it may be that we want to add in some of those to this workshop in the future. So that's something that Tom and Tim and I have been talking about, and maybe we'll evolve to embrace some of those in the future as well. So with that, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker in just a moment. For more information, so the conference proceedings are now online. So this year's proceedings, all the papers and the posters and the abstracts are in the ACM digital library. So you can go to dl.acm.org and find the IWOCL proceedings for this year. So as you're watching the talks, if you want to go and look up the papers, you can. They're all ready to go. And of course, the agenda is on the website as well, so you can go and see what's coming up. We've got lots of exciting talks for today and tomorrow. Before I hand over as well, I do want to say thank you very much to our local hosts, go to Cambridge and the Zettascale Labs, and you'll meet some of them over today and tomorrow. I think Paul Collegiate is here tomorrow. So you meet Paul who leads that. So thank you very much to you. Thank you to Tim for doing all the organization. So you've all met Tim, I'm sure, but he makes it all happen. So thank you very much. And to Tom, who's my co-chair, who's going to be taking over in the future. And to all our sponsors. You can see our sponsors on the banner as well. They basically help make this happen. So the financial support they give us is what helps us run the conference. So thank you very much to Coplay and Intel and to Kronos for making all of this possible.